So I started watching this show called Reacher. It's a bit of a thriller action situation, and I was enjoying it. Then I saw that the internet is calling it Dad TV. And at first I thought, oh, it means dads enjoy it. Then I thought, this is not a compliment, is it? Today on the podcast, the rise of Dad TV. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. So lately on the internet, I've heard the term Dad TV. It's been thrown around so much. Now, if you haven't heard of this genre, allow me to introduce you to a prime example.
Reacher, come with me.
No.
Excuse me?
Not until you let these zip ties come off. We both know I didn't kill anybody, and they're uncomfortable.
Get the box cutter.
It's okay. I got it. You guys recycle?
Oh boy, that is from the TV show Reacher. If you haven't seen it, it is a show about the gigantic, muscular, former military dude who also solves crimes. And yeah, he's got a violent streak, but also he has principles. Season 2 of Reacher just wrapped. Reacher is not alone here. Apple TV's war drama Masters of the Air, which is about to come out, is being called Dad TV. And look, I'm a dad. And I watch TV. I want to know what makes Dad TV. So here to explain why Dad TV seems to be hitting its peak right now are two dads, Eric Deggans and Matt Hart. Eric, Matt, welcome to the show.
How's it going?
Hello.
Yeah, nice to see you. I feel like you should explain that clip that you played, because if you haven't seen the show,
yes,
he's been detained by
he's
the
under
police.
arrest.
His arms
yes.
are his hands are bound by plastic zip ties. And when they say he can take them off, he just bursts them with his muscular strength.
Full He-Man style.
To demonstrate to them that he could have broken his bonds at any time. But he chose not to. And until they said it was cool.
We should also note the reason they use zip ties is because the handcuffs weren't big enough.
Yeah.
Because I mean, this is the genre of stuff we're going to be talking about. And I can see that there are smiles on your faces as we get into this. Eric, I'm going to start with you on this one. Please attempt to define Dad TV for us. What is Dad TV?
Sure. It's not saying that these shows are just for dads. What it's saying is that these shows were developed from the perspective and focused on what dads like. They were configured to appeal to middle-aged males, is basically what I was saying. And middle-aged males often are dads. So in Reacher's case, not only is he sort of an action figure, turned into a person. he's in a weird way, he's G.I. Joe and Sherlock Holmes in one person.
Yes.
But he's also he doesn't have any responsibilities, really. He lives this nomadic life where he doesn't have a mortgage, he doesn't have a car payment. He doesn't have luggage. Yeah. The only thing he carries around with him is clothes on his back and a toothbrush.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a fantasy. I mean, in a lot of ways, it doesn't make sense. But being freed of all of the things that us dads often have to worry about, including our romantic partners and including our children and including our mortgage and including our car payment and including feeding and clothing everyone, to be freed from all of that is a fantasy that I think dads have and middle-aged men have, here and there. And to have a character that embodies that at the center of a murder mystery show, that's sort of the definition of Dad TV.
Yeah, I mean, like the first time you meet Reacher, he had just finished walking something like 20 miles, and it's because he is showing up in this town because he is, he wants to visit the birth site of this blues musician. He's just following a little niche interest that he has, and he gets into trouble, but, that he finds his way out of it.
He's basically an emotionally crippled super hunk that is also a drifter who gets justified violence taken care of.
You know what? That's a very apt way of putting it.
That is quite a cynical way, I think.
No. He just I was watching it last night, and there was a scene where they were skeet shooting, which is like dad catnip, and they were listening to Boz Scaggs, and I was like, wow, this is real dad all of a sudden. And I'm a dad. I think people like to have a new little phrase like, oh, it's dad TV or whatever.
Sure.
But you're absolutely right. This is just a demographic. This is what older men. I've got, we can go further into the breakdown of what makes a show a dad show. But
Boss Skaggs. I think
Boss
that's
Skaggs,
the line.
Yeah, step on, yeah.
I mean, like, let's do that. Let's get into the tropes and the cliches of the genre, Eric. What are the tropes and the cliches of what makes dad TV dad TV?
It stars a man. It stars a man who is usually middle-aged or on the young end of middle-aged or acts middle-aged. You know, Reacher's played by an actor who's a little young for that, but the way he acts is kind of middle-aged. And
It's
so
like, I'm mature.
you think about CSI
Yeah.
And the lead character there. You think about NCIS and Mark Harmon's character. You think about a show like Longmire, Walt Longmire, that character. You know, they're often loners.
Yeah.
They have trouble attaching themselves to people. And the major conflicts in the show are, you know, them feeling responsible for other people and navigating that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also genres that men, you know, find appealing. So like Westerns or action, you know, and then there's also, there's often a component where there's a lot of male camaraderie. So there's you know, they have a crew maybe that they work with.
I mean, for me, and I'll just take you to task over this, the number one dad show is Yellowstone.
Yellowstone.
Yeah,
because it's got
Kevin Costner's Yellowstone.
Yeah, it's got all these things in it that that are tenets of it. It's
a man trying to defend his land.
Yeah, it's got like ethics, you know, old school ethics. You know how I was raised. That's a big one. There's hot ladies in it. The key here is suppressing emotions.
That's Yellowstone.
We don't talk. We don't cry. We have bourbon.
Yellowstone is a show where emotions come out in violence and they don't really come out in any other kind of expression, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, like Yellowstone is, even the dialogue, Eric, is written in these like terse sort of short bursts. No one has long sentences of dialogue in Yellowstone, right? Like
that is true. Although I think Yellowstone also mixes in a lot of elements of soap opera that aren't typically found in dad TV shows. And I think that's one reason why it has a wide appeal. But I think that's also another reason why I would say it has a lot of elements of dad TV, but it doesn't distill sort of the dad TV vibe in quite the same way that a show like Reacher does, or a show like Bosch does, or a show like Longmire does, where there's much less of the emotionalism and the soap opera-ness. Yeah. And it's much less about relationships between the characters, and it's much more about the mystery that's at hand, or the action thing that they have to do, and the killer they're pursuing. And not so much, how do I feel about the fact that, you know, my daughter is my heir apparent, but she's crazy and I'm not sure she should take over the company. You know what I mean?
The soap opera element does have an actual purpose in this, though, because one of the tenets of dad TV, too, I would say, is nappability. Like, can you, and I'm not being funny here, can you doze off for 8 to 13 minutes without missing something?
A dad nap.
Yeah, a dad nap, you need to have those. And that's why you would select
what
basketball.
I would say is that that describes low quality dad TV. Because really, I think what we're talking about is a genre that has series that execute this idea really well, and then there's genres. There's series that don't execute it quite as well. And again, you know, I'm trying to talk about dad TV in a way that it's not a pejorative. A lot of critics use the term dad TV to describe shows they don't respect. So they might include something like that as a description of it because ultimately they're trying to describe this genre that they don't think is good. But I think it's possible to do good dad TV. And frankly, if you produce a season of Reacher where you're falling asleep during one of the episodes, then you have made an error as a person who creates television.
Or you know your audience.
Every episode of that show should be interesting enough that you're engaged in it because it's an action drama. Yeah. I mean, if you can't make an action drama about a guy hunting down someone who's knocking off, you know, ex-soldiers or who is, you know, assassinating people in a small town, why are you making television?
Hey, listen, even plays have intermissions. That's all I'm saying here. You can take a little, like, I think it's like a clever move to strategically place this,
like an action dip, if you will.
Yeah. Like, have the important parts at the start and end. Because I fall asleep all the time.
Matt, in a streaming economy where virtually every conceivable genre and format of television is readily available, why Dad TV? What purpose does Dad TV serve, do you think?
Well, the real true answer is that I think there's a bit of crisis in masculinity happening right now with men of this age. Middle-aged men, I think, for a long time felt like they had utility, and I feel like a lot of men maybe feel like they've lost that utility. And these shows you'll notice a lot of the violence is what we call justified violence, where someone's being protected or helped. And that's a common male fantasy where you're allowed to beat the crap out of someone as long as you're saving them from or saving someone else from it, or saving a child. Or this justified violence is like therapeutic, I think, in some way. And it's really like it's about distilling everything we like into an hour. We want an hour, and that's what we've come down to here, and with shows like Reacher. And it's good. It's just a guy coming in like a bull in a china shop, wrecking stuff for a while. I get my 4-minute nap in, and we're good.
But I'll tell you what struck me about the Dad TV as a discourse point is that we don't tend to talk about stuff that men are watching as a collective. I think there's a lot of conversations about shows that are not necessarily directly made to like middle-aged men. So this kind of struck me as like the first time we're like, hey, there is a genre of shows that is specifically catered to men. And so it's, in a way, this whole discourse is like revealing to me of an industry dynamic that has always been there, which is like industry is always trying to make shows that appeal to men, but we don't necessarily talk about or acknowledge that. Does that make any sense, Eric?
Absolutely. I mean, as a person of color, you will understand that we don't often talk about what white people do.
Yes.
We just assume that that's what everybody does.
Yeah.
And we say things like soccer mom, and we say things like evangelical Christian when we really mean, suburban white mother and, religiously affiliated white person. So in the same way that men don't often call attention to how they dominate industries by talking about what they care about, and instead present it as something that everyone is interested in. But when these Dad TV shows come along, they are so specifically formatted to appeal to men that it's undeniable what's going on there.
Is there something wrong with that? Because we do have the Kardashians or something.
The only thing I would say, I'd say two things are wrong with that. Number one, when you pretend that you're not doing that you're not targeting male fantasies. I mean, when my story about Dad TV went up, there were women who said, hey, I like these shows too. And I'm like, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love shows. I mean, I love Sex and the City. That's a show that's not written from my sensibility necessarily, but I enjoy watching it. But to try and pretend that a show that's formulated for female sensibilities is not being true to what the purpose of the show is. So we have to say that these Dad TV shows are formulated to appeal to men, and they're about sort of how men see things. And then if women like them too, that's great. But the problem is if we don't admit that's what we're doing, then it's a way to not have the conversation about how men dominate things. And then the other thing is, if that's not also happening for women, are we also getting enough shows that are done from a female sensibility, and are they getting the resources and the agency that they need to tell the stories the way they want to tell them? Now, the answer to that question now is a lot better than it was 10 years ago. But there was a time when we had all these shows with white male anti-heroes, and we were wondering, where are the shows for women? So that they can see their sensibilities rendered in a high quality drama or high quality comedy. And I think we still have to keep our eye on that. It's better now than it used to be, but those are the two pitfalls, I think, for Dad TV.
This is a great strategy that just came with me here, where we'll put a warning up at the start of the shows, and it'll be like a scale of how Dad TV it is. And it'll be like by cargo shorts. Like this one's 4 to 5 cargo shorts, or 4 to 5 old New Balances.
There you go again. It's associating these jive things with
No, I'm my dad. I'm allowed to do it.
Why don't we have the number of Old Spices?
I'm wearing Old Spice right now, dude.
I want to go back to something that you said earlier, Matt, which is that many of these shows, The Last of Us, Yellowstone, Bosch, they all revolve around a powerful male protagonist who saves the day, right? He ends up going rogue, just a little bit outside the law. He prefers to handle things on his own, right? He doesn't get tied down. He doesn't show emotion, and that's what makes him effective at the thing that he's trying to achieve. Eric, what that leaves little room for in these portrayals of masculinity is the flip side, right? Like the flip side of male toughness is male loneliness, the idea that you sort of have to go at it alone. Where is the place for a sort of nuanced portrayal of masculinity in dad TV, do you think?
Well, I wouldn't say the flip side of dad TV is male loneliness. I would say that's a defining characteristic of many of these characters is that they are lonely, and they have a hard time admitting it, and they have a hard time grappling with it. Through the beginning of the whole second season of Reacher, he's constantly being reminded that the people he used to command in their old army unit stayed connected, and he wasn't connected to them. And he's constantly asking himself, what's going on here? He assumed everybody was like him. And that they didn't have photos of when they were together, and that they didn't keep in touch, and they didn't attend each other's weddings and funerals. But it turns out he was wrong. He was the only one who wasn't doing that. But the thing about dad TV is that in the end, the conclusion is that Reacher is living life the way he's built to live it, and it works for him. So at the end of it, he doesn't change his ways. He doesn't connect to these people anymore. He kind of walks off in the sunset, and he's ready to start his next adventure. So loneliness is a defining characteristic, and eventually they come to accept it in some way. Because if at the end of things Reacher decides to settle down with a woman, then the character is forever changed in a way that's sort of at the core of what that character is. Like, for me, dad TV is the idea that the bulk of the show is focused on male sensibilities. And the thing about The Last of Us is that character that Pedro Pascal plays is, of course, the kind of character we would see in dad TV, and it brings a lot of elements of it. But the thing that's great about that show is that it moves around a lot, and episodes come from a lot of different sensibilities, and that's the whole point of it. So I wouldn't say The Last of Us is dad TV. I would say it has elements of it. But if you really want to look at shows that distill this point of view, it's a show with a single male protagonist who is often lonely and reflects a lot of the sensibilities of men. And what I think is different and interesting is that these modern characters, they are not as sexist. They may indulge in violence, but there's a sense that they do it much less gratuitously, and they visit it on people who deserve it. So I think these depictions of masculinity are changing, and they always flirt with the idea of emotional connection. But ultimately, they conclude that these characters can't be emotionally connected in the way that typical middle-aged males are, because it changes the character too much, and that's the depiction of masculinity that I think is cautionary. That's troubling. Yeah. This idea that these heroes are at their best when they are not strongly connected to spouses and family and the people who love them. Yeah. And that's a message that it's okay to live like that.
So we got like literally 45 seconds left here. We're going to do a quick rapid fire round. We're just looking for yeses or nos about these TV shows, whether they're dad TV or not. The Walking Dead. Eric?
Sort of.
Okay. Matt?
Yes, mostly.
All right. 24?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
The West Wing.
Yeah.
Friday Night Lights.
Ooh. I mean, it's football, right? Yeah, it could be. I think we're showing it's
no. I would say no.
And then Highway Through Hell, the reality show where they rescue trucks that are stuck.
Yeah. Never seen it. But probably yes.
The rule comes down to this. It's like Larry Flint said. It's like when they said, "What is pornography?" He said, "You'll know it when you see it."
That is a perfect place to leave it. Matt Hart, Eric Deggans, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Eric Deggans is NPR's TV critic. He was in St. Petersburg, Florida. And Matt Hart is a regular on the podcast and a member of the band The Russian Futurists. He joined me here in studio. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and you're listening to Commotion. Hey, before I go, I gotta tell you, I'm always fascinated by the way that bands choose to call it a day. Sometimes it's like an abrupt announcement, it comes out of nowhere. Sometimes it's with one last album before they go out the door. Sometimes they do a farewell tour that never ends, so they never really have to call it a day. Well, Toronto indie rock band Tokyo Police Club have been around for a good long while. Their first EP came out way back in 2006. And after nearly 20 years together, they just announced that they are splitting up. This week, they put out this lovely Instagram post, and they wrote that, quote, all magical things must come to an end. They said that they have a few announcements coming before the year's up, before they go, and that they are going to play one final gig in Toronto in November. So, in honor of Tokyo Police Club going out on their own terms, let's go out on a bit of TPC. Here's Hot Tonight. From 2014, that is Tokyo Police Club and Hot Tonight. We're playing them out today because they just announced that they're breaking up. The band's final gig is going to be in their hometown at the end of November. That's going to be in Toronto. And that is it for the podcast today. By the way, remember you can listen to any episode of the show anytime you like, wherever you get your podcasts. And also, if you got a moment, check us out on Instagram. We are at CommotionCBC. Tomorrow on the show, I am so excited to talk about the Oscar snubs, or so-called snubs. Did they really snub Margot Robbie? Did they really snub Greta Gerwig for Barbie? We're going to talk about this. The group chat has a lot of thoughts about that. For now, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. I'm going to be here tomorrow. I'd love to see you then.